You know a family is dysfunctional when the refrigerator has more emotional stability than any of its members. Ours hummed a gentle, consistent lullaby through arguments, passive-aggressive silences, and birthday cakes no one really wanted to eat. It never took sides. It just kept the leftovers cold, like our feelings. My name is Eli. I'm 32, and I've been emotionally avoiding my family for at least 29 of those years. The first 3, I suppose I was too small to make the conscious choice. But once I could walk, I used it mostly to walk away. It's not that they're bad people. No one's out there stealing car radios or running pyramid schemes. It's more subtle than that. The kind of dysfunction that doesn't make headlines, just ruins holidays. We have a family group chat called FamBam. That title was my sister Rachel's idea. She teaches yoga, speaks only in positive affirmations, and believes kale has feelings. Her texts end with emojis like a teenage girl who just discovered glitter. She once sent a gif of a sloth hugging a tree with the caption, "Don't forget to hug someone today." Meanwhile, our brother David replied with a JPEG of a dumpster fire. David is the eldest and therefore holds the honorary title of the one who was supposed to be better. He's a financial advisor with a face that always looks vaguely disappointed, even when he's eating pie. Especially when he's eating pie, actually. He married a woman named Justine who thinks I'm hilariously weird in a way that's not a compliment. They have 2 kids who are apparently already better than me. One of them is 6 and plays the violin. I once dropped a violin at a school recital and cried. Our mother, known in the group chat as Mom, Rachel again, is an enthusiastic believer in boundaries, other people's, not hers. She calls me at 6:45 a.m. every Sunday to tell me which one of her friends' kids just got engaged or pregnant, followed by a long, meaningful pause. She speaks fluent guilt, like it's her native tongue. My father, on the other hand, mostly just shrugs at everything. He shrugs at life. When I told him I got promoted last year, he shrugged and said, "Makes sense, you're not entirely useless." High praise. Chapter 2. The Visit. So, when Rachel suggested a weekend family retreat at a cottage 2 hours away, I thought about faking a pulmonary embolism or a passport emergency, or both. But she was so insufferably upbeat about it, a chance to really connect, that I figured refusing outright would make me the villain, again. So I said yes. Mistake number 1. The car ride up was exactly what you'd expect from a group of people pretending to like each other more than they do. I rode with David and his family, because apparently I drew the short straw. His kids wore matching fleece vests and called me Uncle Eli like they were reciting lines in a play they did an audition for. Justine offered me a protein bar made out of compressed regret. David asked me what I was doing with my life now, like I was a stray dog he decided to check up on. Still writing, I said, which is technically true. I write freelance copy for mattress ads and CBD oil. David nodded like he'd expected as much and changed the subject to real estate. When we arrived, the cottage looked like something out of a Pinterest board titled Rustic Dreamscape, but it smelled like mold and unresolved tension. Rachel greeted us with a group hug and matching flannel pajamas for family bonding photos. I laughed, thinking it was a joke. It wasn't. Chapter 3. Games People Play. On Saturday, Rachel insisted we play a game called Rose, Thorn, and Bud. You say something good from your week, Rose, something bad, Thorn, and something you're looking forward to, Bud. My thorn was the game itself. I didn't say that out loud. Rachel went first. Her rose was that her lemon tree had finally bloomed. Her thorn was the toxicity of processed foods, and her bud was the possibility of opening her own yoga studio with a kombucha bar. David's rose was a stock market surge. His thorn was inflation. His bud was a tax loophole. Justine's bud was spiritual alignment, which made David visibly twitch. When it was my turn, I said, "My rose is that I haven't committed a felony this week. My thorn is that I'm here. My bud is the moment this weekend ends." Rachel smiled like I just farted in a meditation circle. Chapter 4. Mom's Monologue. That evening, after a dinner of lentil something, our mother launched into one of her infamous monologues.
She does this when she's had a glass and a half of Chardonnay, her sweet spot for maximum martyrdom. "You know," she began, "when you all were little, I thought, just maybe, we'd be one of those families that actually liked being together. But I suppose some people are just too cynical." She looked directly at me. The others looked anywhere else. "I blame the internet," she added. I wanted to say I blamed her need for constant emotional proximity and unsolicited advice, but instead I just nodded and said, "Totally, the Wi-Fi is ruining us." Chapter 5. The Thing About Families. The truth is, families aren't built on love, not entirely. They're built on shared Wi-Fi passwords, holiday traditions no one enjoys, group texts you can't leave, and the knowledge that if someone showed up at your door crying, you'd let them in even if they voted differently and once told your college girlfriend that you looked tired and pale. It's messy. It's also the reason I found myself later that night sitting next to David by the fire pit, both of us drinking cheap whiskey in silence like old war veterans. Eventually, he said, "You're funny, you know." I raised an eyebrow. "I think you mean emotionally distant and mildly resentful." He smiled, just a bit. I don't know what shifted, but we started talking about stuff we'd never really talked about, like how Dad never said, "I'm proud of you," because he probably didn't know how, and how Mom once cried for a whole weekend when David said he might move to another city. How Rachel became the sunny one, because someone had to be. It wasn't deep therapy, but it was something. Chapter 6. The Goodbye. On Sunday, we all hugged goodbye like people who had just survived something slightly traumatic but not quite newsworthy, like a minor earthquake or a middle school dance. Rachel took 43 photos of us in the matching pajamas. David pretended not to hate it. Justine gave me leftover lentil stew in a mason jar, which I accidentally left on the roof of my car. On the drive back, I realized something kind of irritating. I didn't hate the weekend. I mean, I hated a lot of it. The group games, the emotional landmines, the constant kale references. But somewhere between my mother's guilt and my sister's relentless optimism, I remembered that there's a strange comfort in people who knew you when you had a bowl putt and thought dinosaurs still existed. Even if they're annoying, even if they'll never really get you. They're your people. And you can't return them. I checked. Epilogue. The fridge again. Back in my apartment, I opened the refrigerator. It made that same low, reliable hum. I stared at it for a minute and thought, this thing has witnessed less drama and judged me less than most of my relatives. But it's never hugged me, never called me on my birthday, never said, "You should call your mother more." So maybe, just maybe, it's not a replacement after all. But it's close. When I got home, I did what every adult pretending to have their life together does. Microwaved something frozen and stared at my phone for 35 minutes, pretending I was too busy to text anyone back. The family group chat was still buzzing. Rachel had uploaded an entire album titled Cottage Cuddles and Family Fun. David, clearly sensing the PR spin, replied with a gif of a man screaming into the void. Mom sent a string of "so blessed" messages. Justine added a quote image that said, "Family is where life begins and love never ends," which I'm pretty sure was printed on a mug somewhere in that God-forsaken cottage. I didn't reply. Instead, I stood in front of the refrigerator again, cold air wafting over my face. I thought about the lentil stew, the pajamas, David's almost kind smile, Rachel's relentless sunshine, and Mom's Chardonnay-fueled monologues. I thought about the weird little way we all orbit each other, like planets in the same gravitational field, not touching, but always connected. It made me want to scream and cry and maybe call them. I did none of those things. Instead, I ate leftover pad thai and watched a documentary about whales. Whales, at least, keep their distance. About 2 weeks after the retreat, Rachel messaged me directly. "Rachel, just wanted to say I'm really glad you came. I think it meant more than you realize." I stared at it for 5 minutes before replying. Me, I'm really glad you exist in a world where kombucha solves things. Rachel, you're such a jerk, but I love you anyway. Me, same. It was the first sincere thing I'd said to a family member in a while. It felt weird, like trying on someone else's shoes and realizing they fit better than your own. Then Mom called. She didn't start with hello. She never does. You know what I was thinking? She said. That it's finally time to respect my personal space. Don't be dramatic. I was thinking we should all go somewhere warm next time. Maybe a cruise. A cruise? Trapped on a floating resort with people who see my childhood as an eternal personality test? Just what my therapist would order. I think I'd rather be eaten by a bear, I said. You say that now, but I'm calling David. He'll talk sense into you. She hung up before I could tell her that David and I had shared a semi-emotional fire pit moment, which now felt like a liability. David called 2 days later. He doesn't usually call unless someone is dying or it's tax season. You know, he began, without pleasantries, the cruise thing isn't that bad. I refuse to be stuck on a boat with Rachel leading sunrise yoga on the deck. She's already planning it, he said. Of course she is. He paused. Then, in a tone that almost resembled kindness, he said, You handled yourself better than I expected, you know, on the retreat. Thanks. I practiced on mannequins. I'm serious. God, don't be sincere. It makes me itchy. But something in me softened. Maybe it was the weird backhanded compliment. Maybe it was hearing someone in the family acknowledge that I wasn't just the designated cynic. Maybe it was just hunger. He sighed. We're all weird, Eli. You're just the only one who says it out loud. I didn't know what to say to that. So I did what I do best, deflect. Still not going on a cruise. The funny thing is, despite everything, the guilt, the unsolicited life advice, the emotional misfires, I found myself scrolling through the cottage photos one night. In one of them, we're all wearing the ridiculous pajamas, squinting in the sun, standing too close. Rachel's holding a thermos. David looks like he's calculating how much this will cost him in therapy. Justine is doing that thing where she smiles like she's networking. The kids look vaguely stunned. And me? I look less miserable than usual. You don't grow up with people without becoming fluent in their language. I know what David's shrug means, I'm tired but fine. I know when Rachel's smile is real and when it's yoga brand deep. I know when Mom's guilt is performative and when it's real, buried under decades of trying to make something work that never quite did. They know me too. They know I'll show up late, make sarcastic comments, and stand just slightly to the side in photos. But I'll be there, because no matter how far you run, some gravitational pulls are just too strong. I've come to the reluctant conclusion that family isn't something you endure, it's something you edit. You take the parts that work, the jokes, the fire pit conversations, the weird way your sister still calls you little bro, even though you're taller and chronically more tired, and you hold on to them. You delete the group chat notifications, you mute the unsolicited wedding updates, you say maybe to the cruise, and then don't book your ticket. You don't need to love every part of your family. That's not the rule. You just need to find enough pieces to keep the picture intact. And you get to choose which parts to frame. Postscript. The fridge has the last word. The refrigerator is still humming. Still cold, still full of questionable leftovers and existential metaphors. Still the most emotionally consistent presence in my life. But now, right next to the leftover pad thai, there's a small mason jar with a label that reads, Lentil Stew, Justine's Vegan Delight. I haven't eaten it, but I haven't thrown it out either. Make of that what you will.